What you are about to watch is the 3 most destroyed Harleys ever brought back to life. Each one is a miracle on wheels, starting with the legendary Harley-Davidson Flathead from 1939 that was resurrected by the gurus from Wheels Through Time. Then, you've got a rusted 1950s Harley-Davidson XL Sportster, which was revived in style by Hagerty. And finally, a total basket case, the 2000 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883, rebuilt bolt by none other than Ed the Brit. Stick around because this is going to be an exciting ride with many twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. This is a 1939 Harley-Davidson Flathead, a bike that's been through the ringer twice. It was drenched by floods on 2 different occasions before being left to rot for over a decade. At first, Matt and the crew at Wheels Through Time were able to fire it up, but the revival didn't last long. So they called in backup, Chris from VL Heaven, one of the most respected Flathead Harley engineers out there. And together, they're going to try to bring this forgotten beast back to life once and for all. The challenge is quite complex because even after the initial assessment and restoration, Matt and his team couldn't tell what the problem was. Chris suspects the oil tank might be clogged with sludge and probably needs to be drained. But that's just guesswork. To properly figure out what's wrong with this machine, they know they've got to tear it down to its bare bones. With every part removed, the restoration quickly turned into a much bigger project than they expected.
Everything that we've gotten into has been a disaster. This thing...
Even Chris, the seasoned Flathead expert, admitted this was one of the worst bikes he'd ever laid hands on. But just when he thought it couldn't get worse, it did. The initial assessment of the engine confirmed the restorer's biggest fear.
Yeah, look at that. Ooh.
There is no easy fix for this engine.
Okay, well...
In other words, if this relic of the open road is ever going to run again, it's going to need a full engine rebuild.
Your old barn bikes that have been sitting for a long time, that's one thing, but this has kind of been exposed to a whole new series of elements.
That was an intense process, featuring not only the engine, but other critical and historically valuable parts of the motorcycle. Just to mention a few, the brakes and hubs were resurfaced, and the transmission was rebuilt. In addition, the flywheels were speed blasted and cleaned up, while the motor mount was welded up and remachined to spec.
I mean, we've been through this motorcycle almost entirely.
Once everything had been cleaned, prepped, and reassembled, it was time to reassemble the engine. But then, Matt remembered he hadn't tried to seat the revamped engine cases into the frame.
I actually forgot to set the motor in the frame.
Now, that's a huge risk because if the fit was off, the entire engine would need to be torn down again just for adjustments. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. All it took was some minor adjustments from Matt. And the engine slid into the frame without stress. Now that the engine is sitting in the chassis, this 1939 Harley-Davidson Flathead is beginning to come alive. But there was still work to be done.
feels good.
So I guess we can take flood bike off the bucket list now.
Yeah.
After 80 hours of hard work from Matt and his colleagues at Wheels Through Time, this bike was finally coming together. In fact, Chris was already imagining how it would sound when Stan finally gets to rev it. But before that imagination becomes reality, they needed to hook the bike to the sidecar, align the wheels, and make specific adjustments to the fork. With the sidecar now hooked, it was time to fire up this 1939 Harley-Davidson Flathead for the first time in 10 years. Unfortunately, the first few tries were met by dead silence, and at some point the men were becoming agitated. They wondered if their time, effort, and resources to restore the bike had gone to waste.
Ooh. Chris is out.
But then, Stan gave it one more try, and the engine responded with a roar. Matt and Chris could barely contain their joy. They swung their hands in the air in excitement. It's a stupendous job. The craftsmanship, skill, enthusiasm, and resolve to attain perfection were fun to watch. Amidst all of the excitement, Matt briefly checked to confirm that the oil circulation problem was fixed, and then it was time to take this beast for a ride.
Here, hop in, man.
From an abandoned relic, drowned in dust, to a functioning bike, this 1939 Harley-Davidson Flathead was now fully reborn. And from the look on his face, you can tell Stan is a proud owner as he rode in the sidecar, watching his old machine tear up the road like a raging bull on a comeback tour. Next up is the 1957 Harley-Davidson XL Sportster. A beautiful disaster with plenty of sparks, but no power and zero performance. Judging by that first scene, it's likely that this bike has faulty plugs, fuel filter issues, or a clogged carburetor. But it probably has more problems than the restorer had prepared for. Nonetheless, they rolled the bike onto a hydraulic lift, grabbed the necessary tools, and dived into the teardown together. With the engine now off, the restorers moved on to the next phase of the project. Once the engine was fully restored and reassembled, the restorer changed course a bit to do some crucial painting work. But right after that, he continued the restoration with some quick-fire reassemblies and reinstallation. As the restorer climbed onto the bike, I could literally feel the burst of excitement running through his veins. But considering what happened with Stan's bike in the first restoration, I was also worried that this 1957 Harley-Davidson XL Sportster might need some time to get going. Or it might not run at all, and I wasn't wrong. The first few kicks were unsuccessful, and a small spark even flared up on one side of the bike. But this restorer wasn't backing down. He kept hammering the Kickstarter, throwing every ounce of strength he could gather into it, and eventually he got the response he was hoping for. He was grinning from ear to ear, and he had a big smile. Safe to say he was satisfied with the outcome, and understandably so. He's worked so hard to transform this 1957 Harley-Davidson XL Sportster from a dirty scrap to a clean and elegant machine. And it's absolutely lovely to watch. But his work wasn't done just yet. With the paintwork dialed in and the final fittings completed, the restorer swung a leg over the saddle again, slamming the Kickstarter as hard as he could. The response was instant, but what came next was even better. He cracked the throttle a few times, flipped his cap backwards, and blasted the headlight on full beam. You just know he's about to take this beast for a spin that'll shake the street. Finally on the list, we've got this 2000 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883, sitting pretty on a hydraulic lift behind Ed the Brit, a renowned auto builder, mechanic, and painter and fabricator. Unlike Matt and the guys at Wheels Through Time, who gave that 1939 Harley-Davidson Flathead a second operational life, Ed didn't specify the issues that were wrong with this bike. He didn't even try to guess. But he did emphasize that his goal for this project was to transform this first-generation Sportster into a hardtail bobber. And that, for me, is just as much a challenge as the first two restorations. He kicked off the restoration with a no-nonsense teardown, dismantling every component on the bike piece by piece. Now it's time to take things to another level with a timely and full-scale repair, restoration, and reassembly. After hours of grinding, welding, polishing, and precision work, here's what the restored 2000 Harley-Davidson Sportster 883 looks like. And trust me, it doesn't get any better than this. Ed was totally committed to the project. He used top-quality material and fabricated very precise brackets and parts all through the restoration. Honestly, it's incredible. This wasn't just a restoration, it was a masterclass in custom bike building. Which of these 3 Harley-Davidson builds impressed you the most? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to check out other jaw transformations on the channel.